They say the divine doesn't shout. It whispers, softly, in places we refuse to go: silence, stillness, and emptiness. But most people are afraid of emptiness, afraid of what they'll find, or what they won't. This is the story of a man who ran from silence, and how emptiness became his master. He was a seeker by name, known in his village for always holding a book, or quoting some mystic. He could recite Rumi, knew the sayings of Baba Yahya Khan, and had once even traveled to sit in the company of a Sufi master. But beneath his knowledge lived a restlessness, a hunger he could not name, the kind of hunger that even books cannot fill. He filled his days with rituals. He woke before dawn, performed ablution with care, whispered long prayers, and fasted not just from food, but from comfort. He lit candles, burned incense, wrote verses in the margins of holy texts. His home smelled of rose water and sandalwood. Yet whenever night would fall, and the world grew quiet, he would grow uneasy. There was something about silence he could not bear. In silence, the noise within him grew louder. He found ways to drown that noise. He'd visit shrines and gather in circles of zikr, where chants filled the air and the body swayed. He believed the sound was sacred, and perhaps it was. But for him, it was also a distraction. He couldn't sit with himself. The moment silence stretched, even a little, anxiety would rise in his chest like smoke from a hidden fire. One day, after years of spiritual discipline, he traveled to a remote retreat center high in the hills, a place where mystics gathered not to speak, but to listen. The retreat leader, a quiet man wrapped in white wool, said only one sentence during the orientation: "To hear the beloved become empty." It haunted him. He tried to meditate but fidgeted, tried to pray but found only dry words. The silence around him was unbearable. It felt like being buried. There was no music, no teaching, no encouragement, only birdsong, the wind, and his own breath. The retreat offered nothing to hold on to. No guru giving answers, just space, and that space terrified him. By the third day, he was ready to leave. "This is not for me," he muttered. "I need guidance, a voice, something." He wandered the hillside alone, wrestling with the silence, trying to fill it with whispered prayers or remembered verses. Nothing helped. That night, he sat under a tree in frustration. The stars were hidden. Even the sky seemed to turn away. He whispered into the emptiness, "Why won't you speak?" And in the silence that followed, something strange happened. He heard laughter, not from the sky, not from the trees, from deep within himself. A soft, almost mocking joy, as if a part of him, long ignored, was finally waking up. Then a voice, gentle, familiar: "You have filled every corner of your soul with noise. Where is the space for me to sit?" He froze. Was it a hallucination? A trick of the mind? He didn't know, but it didn't matter. What he felt was real. A moment of deep truth, a shift in awareness. He realized that in all his years of seeking, he had been controlling the path, choosing what to do, when to do it, how to feel spiritual. He had never surrendered. And surrender, he now understood, meant becoming empty. Empty of effort, empty of identity, empty of the desire to control God. The next morning, he didn't run, he didn't chant, he didn't try, he just sat. For hours, he watched the ants crawl near his feet. He listened to the breath move in and out. He noticed the warmth of the sun on his skin. Nothing happened. And yet, everything did. He wept, not because he was sad, because he had never truly been present before, never tasted the sweetness of pure being. he realized that silence was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of something deeper, something alive. Over the next few days, something began to shift. The silence that once terrified him became like water, holding him, nourishing him. He stopped fearing his thoughts. He stopped chasing signs. He stopped needing God to appear like thunder. Instead, he began to feel God in the stillness. He walked more slowly, ate more consciously, sat longer with his breath. One afternoon, while watching the shadows of leaves dancing on stone, he felt a presence beside him. Not physical, not even emotional, just a knowing, as if the space around him had come alive. And then, a whisper. "I was never absent. You were never still." That night, he sat by a fire with the retreat leader. "I don't know if I've found God," he said quietly, "but I think I've stopped running." The man in white smiled. "Then you've already arrived." He returned home weeks later, not with teachings or titles, but with a silence so deep it transformed every room he entered. He said little, but when he did speak, his words felt like rain. His friends asked what he had learned. He said, "Nothing." They asked if he'd found what he was looking for. He said, "No, I stopped looking." And yet, they could feel something different. In his eyes, his presence, his calm. One evening, a neighbor came to him, desperate for guidance. "I pray," the neighbor said. "I fast. I do all the right things. But I feel nothing. What am I missing?" The man smiled gently. "Stop trying to be full. Let yourself be empty." The neighbor frowned. "But what if I find nothing inside?" The seeker turned teacher looked toward the setting sun and replied, "That nothing is where God begins." In the years that followed, he became known not for his knowledge, but for his presence. He held no formal gatherings, gave no public sermons, yet people came. They came not for words, but to sit in the quiet field of his being. One day, a young woman sat beside him in silence for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "How did you learn to be so peaceful?" He looked at her, eyes soft with remembrance. "By being broken by silence," he said, "and then made whole by it." She nodded and began to cry, though she didn't know why, because in that moment, she too felt it. That quiet flame inside. The story of the man who feared emptiness, a teaching that traveled far beyond words. It passed from silence to silence, from soul to soul, awakening others not with noise, but with the sacred sound of nothing at all.